Welcome back to another edition of ESBR Boxing. I'm Thomas, joined by my colleague Danny, and today we'll be discussing what's next for Canelo Alvarez after his fairly one-sided decision over Edgar Berlanga last night. As always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, interact with our content any way you can. That would be greatly appreciated. So Danny, thank you for joining. Um, Canelo scores yet another uh, fairly lopsided unanimous decision with a knockdown included. All of his fights are kind of looking the same at this point. Um, what do you think is next for Canelo, man? And before we get into that, I'll ask you really, do you think is there anything left for him at 168? Do you think that there's any potential fights that would be acceptable for him to take at that weight class anymore?
I think we all know the name I'm going to say here. It's I and many other people are sounding like a broken record when we call for Canelo to fight David Benavidez. I think he's head and shoulders best contender at 168 pounds. Don't get me wrong, there's other good fighters there, but if there wasn't such a glaring fight for him to take, I wouldn't be opposed to. I think Christian and Billy, whilst limited, is a pretty fun fighter to watch. The French Canadian Diego Pacheco's coming off a very good performance against Selecki. A bit young yet, you would say, for Canelo, but it's I've got little interest in seeing Canelo at 168 if it's not against David Benavidez. I'm hesitant to accuse a fighter of Canelo's legacy and achievements. He's one of the best fighters of this generation, I'm sure, of ducking, but I don't really see how you can call it anything other than that. Just before we get into what's next, I think it was quite telling. I saw a clip. Potentially, you should take this with a pinch of salt. It was Berlanga. I'm not sure if it was on Friday or if it was early Saturday, but he was talking about how much weight he puts on after the weigh-in, and he was saying he gets into the ring at over 200 pounds, which was interesting because Canelo's always said, if I'm fighting David Benavidez and I'm going to be at this big weight disadvantage, I'm going to need 200 million. Did he get 200 million to fight Edgar Berlanga? I very much doubt it. If it's at 168, I wouldn't be opposed to the Terence Crawford fight. I don't know how much chance it would give Crawford, but it's a big fight. It would generate a lot of interest. It would bring in the casual fans, which is always good for the sport. But in terms of competitive matchups, it's got to be David Benavidez.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you, man. Of course, that's what everyone wants to see. That's what I want to see, of course. But uh obviously Benavidez is moved on up to 175 now and seems to be making his home there. Whether or not he would be willing to move down, I feel like he would, but
You would think so.
it's just a matter of I mean, he is big for the weight, but for the Canelo fight, I feel like he would. But it's just a matter of whether or not Canelo wants that fight, and it's looking kind of like he doesn't, if we're just being honest. But it's he's really running out of big marquee fights, and it it's fights like these are just starting to get kind of stale at this point. I don't want to see him against another Berlanga. I don't want to see him against another Munguia. I want to see him in a big fight. Even if it is Terence Crawford, I know that Crawford's going to be moving up two weight classes to fight him and would be severely outweighed. But I would still watch that fight and would like to see it, to be honest. Um, as far as 168 goes, yeah, doesn't really seem like there's much left for him there. Potentially Chris Eubank Jr. in the UK, potentially um, William Skull, potentially. Uh, I mean, yeah, those two are really it, and I don't really think that fans would really be into those fights very much. Um, so you want to see him fight Benavidez, but next in May, Do you think that it will happen? Um, or what do you think that he's going to do?
I don't think it will be David Benavidez. I don't think you'll find too many fans or pundits who do in their heart of hearts believe that. I genuinely think it'll either be Terence Crawford or, as you mentioned, I would not be surprised if it's Chris Eubank Jr., which is a fight I don't want to see. I mean, it would generate a lot of interest over here. How in America, who cares? Well, you'll have a better idea than me, but who would care about that? You know, Eubanks never won a world title at his natural weight of 160. He flirted with super middleweight a couple of times. I think that will be less competitive than the Berlanga fight, less competitive than the Munguia fight, probably less competitive than the John Ryder fight. I would say Terence Crawford is probably slightly more likely. I think even though there's been this fallout between Canelo and Turkey Al Sheikh, I do think they would put what's happened and their egos aside to make that fight because of how big it would be commercially. I think Canelo would want a lot of money. I don't think he'd want half as much as he'd want for the David Benavidez fight. And as you say, even though probably off the back of Crawford Madrimov, there would be less people who would fancy Crawford's chances. I don't necessarily concur with that view. I don't think the reason Crawford struggled with Madrimov was that much due to the size. I just think Madrimov's a really good fighter and a really unique style. And I don't necessarily, don't get me wrong, the weight could obviously prove a factor, but I don't think that was the sole reason. And I don't think actually Canelo is that much bigger than Madrimov, to be honest. So I think it will be Crawford and May. And I would, as we both said, we would like to see it. Not as much as David Benavidez, but certainly a lot more than Chris Eubank Jr. or William
Yeah,
Skull.
yeah, most definitely. Yeah, I will take that fight, and yeah, we both would like to see it. And I think it definitely has a lot. It's definitely a lot more probable than him fighting Benavidez, unfortunately. But I have to mention before we go here, um, Dmitry Bivol, uh, Artur Berdiev, winner of that fight. Do you think that Canelo, he has expressed interest. He does want the Bivol rematch. Um, do you think he fights the winner of that, or do you think there's any chance he fights the winner of that fight? Maybe not next, but at some point next year or afterwards.
I think if Bivol wins, that rematch will happen. I think the reason it didn't happen was Bivol sort of demanded it would be down at 168. But we need to bear in mind this was obviously Canelo's not undisputed at 168 anymore. But more importantly, this was before Saudi interest in boxing. And Dimitri Bivol, despite being one of the best fighters in the sport, he won't have earned a fraction of what he would get for a fight against Canelo Alvarez at 175 for undisputed. So if he wins, and I'm picking Beterbiev, obviously Bivol could win. It's a 50-50 fight. That fight also could potentially take place in May, but if not, I would very much expect that to happen in 2025 for sure.
Yeah, man. We have to see what will happen. Not many. There's a few big names that we want to see. There's many. He has several options to choose from, but there's only a few that I think that we really want to see. So, I think it's just a matter of course, of what he decides to do next. He wasn't really, was very, uh, just shut down any kind of what's next questions in the post-fight presser and interview. Didn't really entertain any of that, so we don't really know what he's going to do next. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. And please like, comment, subscribe, and on the comments section, please let us know how you think or what you think Canelo is going to do next. And yeah, there you have it. Uh, Danny, thanks for joining, and we'll see you on the next one.
Cheers, Thomas.
Cheers.